when a Florida man named Terry Betz found on his island property this curious metal sphere, now known as the Betz sphere.
In 1974, a Florida family found a perfect metal sphere in the ashes of a wildfire.
A large brush fire swept across the property owned by Antoine and Jerry Betz. While assessing the damage, they noticed something very out of place.
Silent, smooth, and behaving like no object on Earth. For decades, no one knew what it was, until Bob Lazar uncovered a Cold War file that matched it almost exactly.
When I first saw it, I thought that this was a US-made, very advanced next-generation fighter, and in fact that this would explain all the UFO sighting. It was only later to find out that that wasn't the case.
Same size, same pulse, same impossible behavior. And if he is right, the truth behind the Betz sphere is not alien. It is something far more unsettling.
They had the military and NASA come and look at this sphere to see if it was some kind of military device or some piece of a spaceship or something like that. Both of them said, no, we don't know what this is.
The fire and the silver sphere. The discovery occurred on Fort George Island near Jacksonville, Florida. After a small fire burned across part of their property, Antoinette and Jerry Betz, along with their son Terry, walked the grounds to inspect the damage. Among the scorched brush and debris, they found something that immediately stood out. Resting in the ash was a smooth metal sphere, approximately 8 inches in diameter. It was unusually heavy for its size, completely seamless, and marked by a faint triangular symbol near the surface. It did not resemble any ordinary industrial object. There were no bolts, seams, openings, or visible points of assembly. Although the family initially assumed it might be an old piece of machinery or a fragment from a ship, its weight, balance, and flawless construction suggested something more unusual. The Betz family lived in a large stone home locally known as the Castle. They placed the sphere near a window and thought little of it at first. Within a few days, however, the object began to behave in ways that defied simple explanation. It emitted faint vibrations at unpredictable intervals and occasionally produced a soft ringing tone that sounded mechanical rather than natural. When exposed to sunlight, the metal warmed rapidly and retained that heat long after being moved indoors, a property inconsistent with common metals of the period. Any assumption that it was a decorative item or a standard industrial component quickly faded. Simple tests revealed far stranger behavior. When rolled across the floor, the sphere acted as though it had its own sense of motion. It would slow, stop, change direction, and often roll back toward the person who set it in motion. Tests on a glass table showed that the object resisted rolling off the edge and sometimes moved upward against slight inclines. Witnesses compared its movements to those of a device responding intelligently to its surroundings. The Betz family could not explain what they were seeing, yet the sphere's behavior was consistent and repeatable. Its reactions varied depending on the environment, particularly changing with light, heat, and sound. Later measurements revealed a rhythmic pulse inside the object, occurring roughly once every 47 seconds. At the time, this detail seemed unimportant. Many years later, that pulse would become a critical connection between the Betz family's mystery and classified United States Navy research involving experimental sonic resonance spheres designed for advanced navigation systems. The sphere's response to music. The sphere's interaction with sound became the first phenomenon verified by witnesses outside the Betz family. One afternoon, Terry Betz and a friend were playing guitar when they noticed something unusual. Specific musical notes caused the sphere to vibrate. Low-frequency tones made it hum audibly, while high-pitched notes caused a sharper resonance. The effect was so consistent that the sphere fell silent whenever the music stopped and reacted again the moment the guitar resumed. Further experiments confirmed that the reactions were not random. The sphere responded to particular frequencies as if it were converting acoustic energy into motion or vibration. In later tests, the family discovered that it exhibited mild magnetic properties. Small metallic objects, such as paperclips, clung faintly to its surface. After extended movement, the magnetic field temporarily increased in strength before fading again. The combination of heat retention, shifting magnetic behavior, and frequency-specific sound response made the sphere unlike any civilian technology known at the time. The Betz family speculated that it might be powered by sunlight, since the humming intensified when exposed to direct light and diminished in darkness. However, there was no visible energy source, no seams, and no mechanism that suggested a power system. The sphere remained completely sealed, yet appeared sensitive to environmental conditions. Interest in the object grew rapidly once local journalists visited the Betz home. A reporter from the Jacksonville Journal later described watching the sphere move on its own across the floor and change direction without being touched. These first-hand accounts turned a local curiosity into a national story within days. Media outlets, research groups, and scientific institutions all sought access to the sphere. The family began receiving inquiries from engineers, academics, private collectors, and eventually representatives from the military. For a quiet household that had never sought any form of attention, the sudden influx of visitors and speculation became overwhelming. Within a matter of weeks, the United States Navy formally requested permission to test the sphere in a controlled laboratory environment. The Betz family could not have predicted the level of interest their discovery would generate. What they viewed as an unusual metal object had already raised concern within circles familiar with technology that converted sound into kinetic force. Decades later, newly revealed documents would confirm that these concerns were not unfounded. Public attention at the castle. After the Jacksonville Journal published its first report on the metallic sphere, public curiosity quickly escalated into widespread chaos. What began as a short local story about an unusual household discovery spread through wire services and national newspapers. Within only a few days, the Betz home on Fort George Island became a constant destination for reporters, photographers, and amateur investigators eager to witness the mysterious object for themselves. For a quiet family that had never sought publicity, the sudden attention was overwhelming. Phone calls arrived throughout the day and night, letters poured in from scientists, hobbyists, and self-proclaimed experts offering theories about the origin of the sphere. Some believed it was a meteorite, others speculated it was a satellite component or even an alien probe. Yet none of these explanations accounted for the strange behaviors that many visitors claimed to observe firsthand. Those who visited the castle described scenes that seemed to blur the line between a physics demonstration and something far more unusual. When the sphere was rolled across the floor, it occasionally shifted direction, as if responding to an unseen influence. When sunlight hit its surface, a faint hum resonated through the walls, deep enough to be felt as much as heard. The large stone structure of the home amplified every vibration, making the sphere's reaction to ambient sound even more dramatic. In interviews, Antoinette Betz remarked that the object almost appeared alive. Terry Betz compared its movements to those of a living creature responding to attention. Whether these impressions were psychological or rooted in genuine physical phenomena was never resolved, but the impact on visitors was unmistakable. The Navy steps in. Because the Betz property was only a few miles from the Jacksonville Naval Air Station, one of the largest military installations in the region, Jerry Betz began to consider whether the sphere might have a military or industrial origin. Practical by nature, she decided to contact the United States Navy and request a formal examination of the object. Her hope was that trained experts with advanced equipment could finally provide clear answers and bring closure to the growing mystery. At first, the Navy hesitated. Standard procedure discouraged involvement in civilian discoveries, especially those attracting sensational or unconventional attention. However, as media coverage intensified and the number of inquiries increased, the Navy eventually agreed to conduct a full evaluation at their facility under strictly controlled conditions. The examinations were comprehensive. The sphere was subjected to a series of tests including detailed X-ray imaging, metallurgical evaluation, and balance analysis. The X-rays revealed one of the most surprising findings. The object was not a solid mass. Instead, it consisted of a hollow shell approximately 1 inch thick. Inside that cavity were at least 2 smaller spherical objects. Further scanning confirmed what the initial images suggested. The inner spheres were perfectly shaped, smooth, and appeared to be suspended freely inside the larger shell. Despite the thorough analysis, no electronic parts, no radioactivity, and no mechanical systems were detected. There were no propulsion components and no markings or serial numbers that would identify it as military equipment. The sphere was not explosive and showed none of the signatures associated with weapons or aircraft systems. Most critically, the Navy stated that the object did not match anything from their inventory, operations, or historical stockpiles. Their official conclusion described it as a high-quality stainless steel object of unknown origin, possibly produced for an industrial purpose. Behind the scenes, some Navy specialists offered more cautious theories. A few suggested it might be an unusually large ball bearing or a component from a heavy mechanical system related to maritime engineering or aerospace machinery. Yet none of these possibilities were supported by definitive evidence. Publicly, the Navy chose to remain silent, avoiding speculation and releasing only minimal information. For the Betz family and the growing number of people following the case, the result was frustration. The Navy had ruled out danger, but not mystery. Their findings only deepened the uncertainty surrounding where the sphere came from and what it was designed to do. The unverified expert. After the Navy returned the sphere to the Betz family, the investigation entered a more uncertain stage. Independent researchers began contacting the household, each hoping to examine what the Navy could not explain. Among them was a nuclear physicist named Dr. Carl Willis, who at the time claimed affiliation with the Omega-1 Institute, a research organization said to be based in New Mexico. Willis arrived at Fort George Island in late April 1974 to conduct a detailed analysis. According to newspaper reports from that period, he performed a series of non-invasive tests measuring the sphere's density, magnetic field behavior, and response to ultraviolet light. What occurred during these sessions remains unclear. The Betz family later recalled that after several hours of testing, Willis seemed visibly unsettled. He allegedly stated that the object's energy readings were inconsistent with any known metallic compound and advised the family to treat the sphere with caution. Shortly after his visit, Willis became unreachable. When journalists attempted to contact the Omega-1 Institute, they were unable to find a public address, staff directory, or any official record of its existence. Whether the organization ever operated under that name remains disputed. To this day, no documentation confirming Dr. Willis's credentials or research history has surfaced. This episode marked the first time the Betz family began to suspect that their discovery might be tied to something larger than an isolated anomaly. They reported seeing unfamiliar vehicles near their property and noticed unusual interference on their home telephones. Although these claims were never verified, the sense of being observed became part of the lore surrounding the case. What is documented, however, is that the sphere's activity increased during this period. The family described stronger vibrations, more pronounced humming, and the return of the 47-second rhythmic pulse detectable only through sensitive recording equipment. The impossible element. The next major examination came from Dr. James Albert Hardin, a mechanical engineering professor from Louisiana who had followed the case through the press. Hardin approached the Betz family with academic caution, promising a rigorous structural and materials study. His findings, if accurate, remain among the most controversial claims ever made about the object. Using X-ray density calculations and magnetic field modeling, Hardin concluded that the sphere's outer shell consisted of multiple layers of stainless steel with different densities encasing an internal cavity roughly the size of a small apple. Within that cavity, he reported 3 smaller metallic spheres connected by extremely fine filaments. According to his analysis, no known manufacturing technique at the time could have assembled such an internal structure without leaving seams or access points. Hardin's most provocative claim involved the composition of the inner material. He stated that its estimated atomic number was around 140, which would place it far beyond any element confirmed by modern chemistry. For perspective, the periodic table officially ends at element 118, oganesson. Substances above that number exist only for fractions of a second in particle accelerators before decaying. If Hardin's measure, the sphere contained a synthetic or extraterrestrial element unknown to science. He also reported detecting faint but consistent levels of radiation emanating from the core. The readings were far below any danger threshold, but high enough to suggest nuclear instability or active decay. None of Hardin's claims were ever confirmed by independent laboratories, and attempts to reproduce his findings produced no conclusive results. Even so, his report shifted the tone of the entire discussion. What had once been viewed as a mechanical curiosity began to be treated as a potentially revolutionary artifact. While many scientists dismissed Hardin's data as calculation errors or instrumentation limitations, others were intrigued by the precision of his measurements and the lack of visible fabrication marks on the sphere. Hardin theorized that the object could represent a compact energy storage device or an early attempt at anti-gravitational containment, citing similarities to theoretical propulsion concepts discussed in classified aerospace research of that era. The attempted buyout. By the summer of 1974, the Betz family's quiet life had unraveled under relentless public attention. Newspapers across the United States printed photographs of the gleaming sphere displayed in their living room. Radio hosts speculated that the government had already classified the object, while tabloids promoted it as evidence of extraterrestrial visitation. In this atmosphere of obsession, unfamiliar visitors began to appear at the family's home with motives that were not always clear. Some individuals claim to represent research institutions or aerospace companies. Others refuse to identify themselves at all. One evening, a group of 3 men arrived at the castle without warning. They carried documents printed on unmarked letterhead and a briefcase containing an offer of $750,000 in cash, an amount worth several million by today's standards. Their terms were direct. The family was to hand over the sphere immediately, ask no questions, and remain silent about the exchange. Jerry Betz rejected the proposal with
Witnesses reported that the object fell silently,
without hesitation, insisting that the sphere belonged to her family and would remain with them until its nature could be properly understood. The men departed without argument, but they cautioned her that interest in the object extended far beyond simple curiosity. The Betz family never learned who they were. In the following weeks, the family experienced a shift in the tone of communication they received. Late-night phone calls came with no voice on the line. Vehicles were spotted idling near the property at unusual hours. Letters bearing federal seals arrived but lacked signatures or clear origins. Whether these incidents were deliberate attempts at intimidation or unrelated coincidences has never been determined, but the psychological effect was significant. The family increasingly felt that they had become part of something far larger than a routine investigation. Amid the mounting pressure, an opportunity emerged to submit the sphere for transparent scientific evaluation. The National Enquirer, seeking to enhance its credibility by partnering with reputable experts, invited the Betz family to New Orleans. There, the object would be examined by a panel that included respected astronomer Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Known for his work with the United States Air Force's Project Blue Book, it would be the first time the sphere underwent analysis in a setting that combined public visibility with structured peer review. Theories and doubts. As time passed and more experts examined the mysterious sphere, skepticism grew steadily among engineers, physicists, and researchers who sought rational explanations for its unusual behavior. The widespread fascination that once surrounded the object began to fade under the focus of scientific scrutiny. A series of logical, although often unsatisfying theories emerged to explain the phenomenon. Some engineers proposed that the sphere might simply be an industrial valve ball, a common component used in pipelines and large machinery. These balls are typically made of hardened steel, feature a flawless metallic finish, and can be found in a variety of sizes. If this theory were correct, the sphere's peculiar movements might be the result of an ordinary object placed in an unusual context, rather than evidence of anything extraordinary. Other experts focused on the internal sounds reported by the Betz family and numerous witnesses. The soft clicking, humming, and occasional rattling could, they argued, be caused by loose internal masses inside a hollow shell. Acoustic specialists suggested that these internal pieces might shift in response to environmental vibrations such as footsteps, wind, or even distant machinery. These internal movements could create resonance patterns that, when amplified by the surface the sphere rested upon, made the object appear to move on its own. The so-called boomerang effect, in which the sphere seemed to roll back toward its starting point after being pushed, was also addressed. Some physicists suggested this could be the result of uneven weight distribution inside the sphere or microscopic imperfections on its surface. Such factors could cause the sphere to follow erratic rolling patterns that might look intentional but were actually governed by simple physical mechanics. Despite these theories, none of the explanations fully accounted for all reported behaviors. Eyewitnesses, including trained observers, insisted the sphere displayed reactions that did not align with conventional physics. Why did it sometimes resist rolling off the edge of a table? Why did its movements increase in strength or unpredictability when exposed to direct sunlight? And why did multiple independent observers, including military personnel, report consistent behaviors that appeared to defy explanation? The sphere's apparent sensitivity to external stimuli, almost as if it were responding to its environment, remained a central mystery. For many skeptics, the simplest conclusion persisted. The Betz sphere was nothing more than a ball bearing, its behavior exaggerated by hopeful or overly imaginative witnesses. Yet the object never fit neatly into that explanation. Too many inconsistencies remained. Too many variables could not be dismissed. The sphere resisted being categorized, and for that reason, it continued to provoke curiosity long after its discovery. The cold truth. By the 1990s, the Betz sphere had almost entirely faded from public memory. The early media frenzy had long since ended, and most popular science publications dismissed the case as a misunderstood curiosity born from human imagination, anecdotal mistakes, and a handful of unusual but ultimately explainable events. Exhausted by attention and speculation, the Betz family withdrew from public life and stopped granting interviews. The United States Navy, once actively involved in the investigation, closed its files and refused to comment any further. In the broader public consciousness, the Betz sphere settled into obscurity. It became a minor footnote among the many strange but forgettable stories that briefly captured national interest before disappearing into the margins of folklore. It joined the ranks of urban legends and unexplained oddities that fascinated a small circle of enthusiasts while leaving the rest of the world indifferent. Then, unexpectedly, in early 2025, the story resurfaced. A private collector, long rumored to possess an object matching the description of the Betz sphere, made a surprising decision. He donated the metallic orb to Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, a facility known for its advanced scientific research and high-precision materials testing. The sphere had reportedly been kept in storage since the late 1970s, preserved but virtually forgotten. The only accompanying documentation was a letter claiming it had once belonged to the Betz family. Although researchers at Oak Ridge were skeptical, curiosity prevailed. They agreed to conduct a new series of analyses, not because they believed the legends surrounding the object, but because it represented a rare chance to re-examine a cultural mystery that had puzzled investigators for decades. The results of this fresh examination were far more astonishing than anyone anticipated. The findings did not align with the long-held assumption that the sphere was merely an industrial artifact. Instead, the tests revealed properties that challenged established scientific explanations and reopened questions that had been considered settled for nearly half a century. The Hollow Twin. After the testing session in New Orleans, the story of the Betz sphere vanished from headlines as quickly as it had appeared. By late 1974, journalists had moved on to other stories, and the Betz family withdrew into privacy. The object that was returned to them sat quietly in their home, completely inert. The continuous hum that once defined it was gone. According to the family, the sphere felt empty in every sense. Its weight seemed different. Its internal vibrations had ceased, and it no longer reacted to light, sound, or motion in the strange ways it once had. Whatever had animated it, whether a mechanical system or a phenomenon that had yet to be understood, had disappeared. In the years that followed, attempts to revive scientific interest steadily failed. Skeptics dismissed the case as a combination of magnetic quirks, household acoustics, and human misinterpretation. Some investigators proposed that the object had simply been an industrial valve ball manufactured in the 1950s, pointing to its size and composition as evidence. This explanation accounted for the materials, but not for the behaviors witnessed by multiple independent observers. With no definitive test results and no consensus among experts, the case hovered uncomfortably between plausible engineering and the unknown. Despite fading media attention, the legend of the sphere persisted in private circles. In the mid-1980s, one researcher claimed to have located a nearly identical sphere within the estate of astronomer Dr. J. Allen Hynek following his death. The object reportedly matched the size and markings of the original and carried a handwritten label that read, "Florida Case 1974." No confirmation was ever made, and the whereabouts of that object, if it existed at all, remain unclear. Whether it was the original sphere or simply another industrial relic has never been determined. By the early 2000s, the Betz family rarely spoke publicly about the case. In occasional interviews, Terry Betz insisted that the sphere returned to them, after New Orleans was not the same object they had originally surrendered. He maintained that its weight, magnetic behavior, and acoustic resonance were all different in measurable ways. Eventually, the family placed the hollow sphere into storage, where it remained untouched for decades. No official record of it appears in any scientific archive or private collection, leaving its final fate unknown. The pulse. Beneath the silence. For nearly 50 years, the Betz sphere remained a finished chapter, an unresolved curiosity slowly fading from public memory. That changed when a small but significant discovery brought the mystery back into focus. In the year 2025, newly declassified documents from Cold War acoustic research programs became available to the public. Hidden among these files were references to a series of experimental devices called sonic resonance spheres. These prototypes were engineered to convert sound vibrations into kinetic energy, allowing them to navigate autonomously without traditional fuel systems. Each model reportedly emitted a steady internal rhythm used for frequency calibration. In the recovered documents, that rhythm was described as one pulse every 47 seconds. The pattern matched perfectly with the signal recorded inside the Betz home in 1974. According to physicist Bob Lazar, who examined the declassified material, the devices had been jointly developed by the Navy and the Air Force as part of a classified propulsion research initiative. Several test spheres were lost during transport in the mid-1960s. Their serial specifications, including size, mass, and shell composition, closely resembled the object discovered on Fort George Island. If Lazar's interpretation is accurate, the Betz sphere may have been one of those missing test units, an early form of self-propelling surveillance technology that relied on sonic resonance rather than chemical fuel or magnetic propulsion. The behavior described by the Betz family aligns closely with the characteristics listed in the Cold War files. The sphere's movement in response to sound, its heightened sensitivity to sunlight, and its retention of heat are all consistent with the documented performance traits of the prototypes. The files also noted that these devices tended to become unstable when exposed to prolonged acoustic or solar energy, which could result in unpredictable motion or vibration. The documents further indicated that strong electromagnetic fields could cause the internal components to overheat, leading to temporary shutdown. This may explain why the sphere returned to the Betz family seemed inert compared to the object they originally observed. If the connection is real, the implications are profound. The sphere that captivated the world in 1974 was not extraterrestrial or supernatural. It was the product of a Cold War engineering program decades ahead of its time, a compact energy conversion system capable of transforming sound and motion into mechanical propulsion. And someone, fully aware of its importance, may have ensured that it vanished before the truth could reach the public. The Betz sphere is gone, the files are redacted, and the people who knew the truth have vanished. But the pulse, one beat every 47 seconds, still echoes through the story, and somewhere, another sphere may still be waiting to be found. So here's the question. Do you think the Betz sphere was lost military tech or something far more advanced? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.